Good morning. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, Director Woods is being screened for reappointment as Director of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety. The term commenced February 1st of this year and expires on February 1st of 2028. Director Woods, we have received your confirmation packet. Are there any changes or any additional information you'd like to provide to the committee?
There is not.
Mr. Chairman, Director Woods attended the Citadel from 1984 to 1988 and received a Bachelor of Arts. He also attended Columbia College from 2000 to 2002 and received a Master of Arts. Director Woods has completed the annual in-service requirements to maintain his South Carolina law enforcement certification. He's also completed the South Carolina Executive Institute in 2023. He has worked as a highway patrol trooper from 1989 to 91 for the South Carolina Highway Patrol. He then worked as a patrolman from 91 to 92 for the Charleston Police Department. Also worked as a highway patrol trooper from 92 to 2020 for the South Carolina Highway Patrol. Since 2020, Director Woods has worked as the Director of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety. Director Woods was a district representative for the South Carolina Trooper Association from 1996 to 98 and from 2002 to 2003. He also was the president of the South Carolina Troopers Association from 98 to 2000 and also 2003 to 2004. And from 2005 to 2006, he was the vice president of the South Carolina Troopers Association as well. He is a member of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Association and the South Carolina Police Chief Association. Director Woods is a member of the Lower Richland Masonic Lodge, Boylston Masonic Lodge, Columbia York Rite Bodies, Columbia Scottish Rite, Jameel Shrine, Kappa Alpha Order, the Citadel Alumni Association, and Our Lady of the Lake Men's Club. A background check of law enforcement records, driver's records, and credit records indicated no negative information and no tax liens or judgments against Director Woods.
No speeding tickets.
No speeding tickets. From the information Director Woods submitted, it does not appear he has any financial conflicts of interest that will result from his appointment. Director Woods, why do you wish to continue serving in this role?
Well, as I've stated on a number of occasions, I never really anticipated in assuming this role, and I never had aspired to it until I was given the opportunity by the governor to fill in as the interim beginning in 2020, and then, of course, being confirmed in 21. But it just gives me an opportunity to continue to serve an organization for which I've spent my entire professional life and to serve the men and the women of the Department of Public Safety as well as the citizens of South Carolina. I could think of no better position that I could ever have aspired to or ever held.
Director Woods, explain your vision for the department and how has that changed at all, if at all, since you started or since you've been in this role?
Sure. Our vision is very employee-centric. What we want to ensure that all of our employees understand that they're valued, they're respected, and they're heard. They're valued in that what they do has meaning, has purpose, has impact. They are respected because so few people choose this type of profession that involves service and sacrifice. And they're heard because our leadership at the Department of Public Safety wants to ensure that we walk with them through the challenges that they experience during their law enforcement career and keep them in a profession that allows them to serve the citizens of this state.
Thank you. Are you committed to serving a full term?
I am.
Mr. Chairman, Director Woods has reported that he has been sued in his official capacity on 8 separate occasions. As discussed in his initial appointment hearing, while working as a patrolman for the Charleston Police Department in 1991 and 92, he was named in 2 lawsuits. While working as a trooper for the South Carolina Highway Patrol, he was also named in 2 lawsuits, one that occurred in 94 and another concerning a personnel action taken by South Carolina DPS in 2003. As South Carolina Department of Public Safety Director, he's been named in 3 lawsuits, all brought by the same individual in 2022, concerning a claim of unlawful arrest by Highway Patrol trooper. Director Woods was also named in a suit in 2022 against the South Carolina Executive Branch for an alleged failure to reduce the highway fatalities. In response to these suits, Director Woods has stated, quote, "While I have no record or recollection of the disposition of the 2 lawsuits brought during my time with the Charleston these are talking about the other ones. The Charleston Police Department, the claims against me in the lawsuit brought during my time with South Carolina Highway Patrol and DPS were all dismissed. Director Woods also self-reported a disciplinary proceeding in 2002 with the SEDPS Office of Professional Responsibility. This was also discussed in your initial appointment hearing. He explained, quote, I was questioned by the South Carolina DPS Office of Professional Responsibility concerning accusations that I made unprofessional comments to another employee. I was never informed that an official complaint was lodged against me in the matter, and although there was an apparent finding that I acted improperly, I was never informed of the disposition of this matter by the department, and no disciplinary action was ever taken against me. Director Woods, do you have any additional comments or that you'd like to make about these matters that I just briefly summarized?
I do not. I believe the summaries adequately cover it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments you'd like to make to this subcommittee?
I have none at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions for Director Woods at this time.
All right. Members of the subcommittee have questions for Director Woods? Yes, Senator Adams.
Good morning, Director Woods. How are you?
Doing well, Senator. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. Question. So since you've been in there now 4 years as director, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So since that time, is your officers, have they increased? Your troopers, have they increased? Are you maintaining a steady flow? Or are you having a revolving door? Or is that slowed down at all? Or
It has slowed significantly across the board. Of course, we have 3 law enforcement divisions: Bureau of Protective Services, State Transport, and the Highway Patrol. As we compare last year's numbers to this year's numbers, the Highway Patrol is 24 troopers ahead. Went from 758 to 782 personnel, and the State Transport Police and Bureau of Protective Services are nearly fully staffed right now, with STP approaching 120 officers and Bureau of Protective Services hovering at 88 officers. So we have seen an increase in the number of personnel, and those numbers have been relatively stable over the last couple of years.
okay, so the troopers are almost full as well?
No, not at all. No, the troopers are not.
But the transportation and protective services. I got
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is much more challenging, as you can imagine.
What would full be? And I apologize for
That's right.
What would full be for what would you like to have as far as Highway Patrol? We're
Well,
at 782. What would you? What's
Well, what we would ideally like to have is, I believe I testified in 2021 during my confirmation hearing. If we had around 1,200 personnel with the Highway Patrol, that would really be great. Over the last 20 years, the average number of personnel we've had with the patrol is about 800. So trying to achieve that increase by about 50% is something that's very much an uphill battle. But I give a lot of credit to our leadership within the patrol and our leadership with DPS as a whole, that we've been able to effectively leverage technology to assist our personnel and been able to successfully accomplish their missions, as well as giving our leadership in the field adequate latitude to be able to innovatively use schedules in order to meet those demands also. So, not in any way, of course, to try to avoid the question, but it is where we are right now is about where we've been over the last 20 years. We do see a little bit of traction, but right now that's probably the number that we will likely have into the foreseeable future.
Have the raises helped you out at all?
Absolutely, yes, sir. A couple of things have really helped us. The raises have significantly. We've gone from a starting salary for a trooper and officer around $39,000 a year to $55,000 a year. And then when we implemented our career path a couple of years ago, that allowed us to define what troopers can expect in terms of pay steps over 15 years in service to about 18 years of service. So at a master trooper, they're going to make around $74,000 a year. So with that said, that has been very encouraging in terms of stabilizing some of our turnover, but also encouraging officers to come on the job from other areas. And because what we've done, which we had not done in the past, is we've given credit for all law enforcement service when somebody applies for the job. So, for example, you had somebody who had 18 years or 20 years of service with another department, they can come on with us now at $74,000 a year, getting full credit for that 18 to 20 years of service. So that's encouraged people to come on the job. And we've also seen a number of our folks who have left who've come back, just rehires, but also
Not always greener, right?
rehires. I'm sorry.
It's not always greener, right?
That's right. That's right. So a lot of rehires. We've had probably over 30 of those over the last, I'd say within the last fiscal year. So that's been extremely encouraging and allowing us, of course, we're very grateful for that, to allow us to bring these guys back without earning limit. That's helped us tremendously. And just to elaborate just very briefly on that, when we're bringing experienced officers back, especially those retirees with such a young workforce, that's a tremendous stabilizing factor for us when they can speak to experience as to what they've seen in the past and where we are now and the benefits of where we are now and providing a future for our younger officers and troopers.
To kind of go back to your workforce, you have slots for almost 1,000, though, correct?
That's right. Yes, sir. Actually, when you look at our number of FTEs, it's probably around total number for the patrol is over 900. I think it's around 909, around that number.
Okay.
Close to 1,000. You're right.
And your academy, you still go to the academy, just troopers go to the academy on their academy date. They're not mixed in with other agencies. Is that still that way?
No, that's not the case. Now, we do our own highway patrol specific basic, which is if you're a new hire with no law enforcement experience, that's 10 weeks. It's 6 weeks for those who have prior law enforcement experience. The ones who come on with no law enforcement experience, they go through our basic, and then they go through the regular academy basic also.
So they go to your 2 weeks?
They go to our 10-week program, and then they go to the Criminal Justice Academy with other law enforcement officers and are certified as every other law enforcement every law enforcement officer in the state is certified.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
What's a new trooper starting out at?
Well, a new trooper, no experience walking in the door, starts off at $55,000 a year.
All right. So, which is, I mean, that's not bad.
Right.
Now, granted, it can be kind of a dangerous job, and I understand that. But private sector wages have been rising pretty significantly over the past 10 or 12 years. You're in a much better position there than you have been, I suspect. I'm curious though. I mean, you were telling us about the success that you've had in being able to bring back some retirees.
Yes.
Yet you're stuck around 800. I mean, you're at 782. You'd like to go to 1,200. Sure. What do you see as the impediments to get to you? I mean, and it almost like I inferred from your comments that you seem to be resigned to being stuck at around 800 for the foreseeable future. What are the impediments there? Are there things that we could do to help fix that, or is this just an environmental scenario?
I think honestly, Senator, to be very frank, is there's just not a lot of people who want to do this job, especially doing the job of a highway patrolman. As you've mentioned, it's a very dangerous job. In a lot of ways, it's very different from other types of uniform law enforcement. It's very difficult to find somebody who's willing to stop a car in the middle of nowhere in the middle of night by him or herself. So it's extremely challenging. It takes a very special person to want to do this job and to remain on this job. From my perspective, if we're able to hire and maintain a workforce of dedicated employees, even if it's at 800, we can still effectively accomplish our mission. It's by no means ideal, but when we're able to identify and hire and retain with good salaries people who truly are committed to doing the job, then I think we can be very effective.
Tell me what kind of an impact you see that you're having on local law enforcement. I mean, are you taking officers from sheriff's departments and from the municipal police departments?
I think there are. Now, we are experiencing some rehires. I don't have the exact numbers as to what that looks like. But what we find is that there's sort of for lack of a better description, sort of an ebb and flow. As salaries move up on both sides, we see officers come from local law enforcement, and we still see a number of officers go back to local law enforcement. It's not always a salary thing. Sometimes it's just they just prefer to do that job.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would be fairly confident in saying that those numbers end up being a wash. That
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, are there things that we can do to try to help the work experience, to improve the work experience, to make the job more attractive, or is just the societal landscape, the environment, such a difficult thing that folks are having to deal with that maybe even we couldn't encourage enough?
Yeah, I think there's probably one thing that would be extremely helpful is to see consistent pay increases,
Mm-hmm.
to have those sufficiently funded so that we can remain competitive, certainly with law enforcement. The pay increases that we've gotten over the last couple of years, number one, made us competitive regionally, and then very much made us competitive nationally. So that's very good, but we've got to be able to keep pace.
Right.
If we allow those wages to stagnate, we're going to fall behind again.
And it's not only just keeping pace with North Carolina, Georgia, or other states. And I mean, it seems to me that when the private sector is performing very well and there are opportunities that open up there, that you're competing against those folks as well.
Oh, absolutely. Generally what we find is when there's a slowdown in the economy, we tend to benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
When the economy's strong, it's impossible for us, quite frankly, to compete with private sector wages, the highest paying private sector jobs, and the types of employees that we want to compete for. So again, it sort of goes back to the point, as long as we can find those who are truly dedicated to doing the job of law enforcement, then we're always going to be effective in what we do.
How often do you get out around the state and visit with the troopers on the road, got to the different troops and just interact with them?
Well, as often as I possibly can. Whenever I can get out of the office and go out to the field, that's what I like to do. Last year, I went out through the month of March and I met with every one of our law enforcement, telecommunications, and administrative personnel face to face. When I can, as a matter of fact, last Friday offered an opportunity for me to get out in the field just to visit the Troop 2 headquarters there and be able to see some of our folks. So just as often as I can, I want to get out and meet face to face with our folks because I want to know firsthand. It's been a long time since I've done that job, and a lot of things have changed.
The world has changed,
and absolutely. And I don't want to take for granted that the perspective that I gained 30 years ago is still valid today, because I know in a lot of ways it's not. So
sure.
I want to hear from our people.
Well, what is your assessment of the morale right now?
I think our morale is good. Is it ever going to be extremely high? No, it's not. You're always going to struggle at certain times, and in certain areas, especially where our manpower is particularly low. It's tough. It's a tough job overall, but it's tougher when you don't have enough people there to help you keep pace when times are really busy, especially with calls for service. So that's always going to be a factor. That's always going to be a piece. But I think for us, as long as we continue to acknowledge as leadership that we understand that's a challenge for our folks, that we identify what those challenges, we hear what their challenges are, and we work consistently to fix them. Now, whether that's with money or empowering our leadership at the local level to be able to do things that help alleviate some of that strain during those peak hours, whatever we do in that regard, I think that helps mitigate it. But I think our morale is overall very good right now, but there are still some challenges. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, each of us interact with your officers on a fairly regular basis. I mean, I see people in restaurants or see them around. Hopefully, it's not on the side of the road. But I tend to interact with the patrol more so than the transport police, and obviously we see some of the BPS folks around. And usually when I'm interacting with the patrol, I'll ask them, how things going, how's the morale, what do you think about the director? I mean, I ask them, about all those things.
That's fair.
And I'll tell you, the response that I get back is much better today than it was 8 years ago. I mean, at times in the past. So my assessment in my little part of South Carolina is that morale seems to be going pretty well with the patrol. But that's an important thing. I mean, that's an important thing with retention and recruitment. And that's kind of why I was asking you the question earlier about how often you get to interact with them. I mean, I would encourage you to make time for that. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the office. There are lots of things that only you can deal with because you're the one with director in front of your name. But I also think for the guys on the road, having you show up and having them be comfortable with you so that they can talk to you, and that if there is a problem, they're comfortable enough talking with you about that. I think that's very important. It's important that those guys, ladies, see you, and that they're comfortable being around you. Now, I'll tell you, everything that I've heard about you has been positive. I just encourage you, don't get so busy in the office that you got to stay there all the time. Right. Make time, schedule time to get out around the state. It's important that those troopers and the transport police, that they be able to see you, because I think that's going to help a whole lot with their morale. But it's also going to help, as you said, it's going to help you understand what they're dealing with, so that maybe you can respond to it, or you can pass that along to us so that we can be more responsive to it. But I appreciate what you've been doing. Don't get so caught up in the office that you can't get out.
And I appreciate that, Senator. Thank you.
Senator from Orangeburg.
Thank you, Director. I agreed that the morale seems to be better than it has been, but there continue to be challenges, and I want to talk about that for a minute. It seems that, particularly in the rural areas, by the time I'm in court with troopers almost every week, by the time I sort of get to know them, they're gone. Right. And they're transferred. And I don't know if that's because they want to transfer to urban areas, or serving in a rural area is more difficult. But can you address that? Because it just seems that we don't have any. We get good troopers, and don't get me wrong, they're very professional. They do their job very well. They just don't stay. And so, is that just troop-wide, or is that a rural issue more so?
I think it's obviously going to be more noticeable in the rural areas because there's fewer troopers there.
Right.
But I think in terms of sort of the transient workforce, that's I think from my perspective, at least, it's a very common cultural issue for us right now, a generational issue. So it is hard to maintain that level of stability in the workforce. We see very, very, very few people who are going to remain on this job for as long as I have, or Chief Keel, or any number of these law enforcement officers sitting behind me. So that's going to be a problem. That's a persistent issue. There are very, very few that we're going to see that are going to go into these areas and stay. For us, it's as long as we can maintain some level of consistent staffing, not necessarily consistent personnel, then I think we're winning the battle. As far as maintaining presence in some of the rural areas, and I know the Colonel has done an outstanding job with this by reconstituting what we call our ACE, or Area Coordinated Enforcement Teams, where we can at times maintain or present a higher level of visibility in these areas. I believe we're making a difference there.
So the statistics would show that our state does not fare well in DUIs. Mm-hmm. And I guess we know that because you arrest a lot of people for DUI. I mean, it's not like you're not arresting them. But, at 800, it just seems like we are stuck. I mean, there are hundreds of people a day moving to South Carolina. I mean, there are some areas that enough people are moving here in a year to want us, not to want us, but to require us to build a new high school, to build a new fire department. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are just coming out of Charleston on up through Dorchester and Berkeley and into Holly Hill. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds of people moving there, and you're trying to enforce the traffic laws on much busier roads with the same number of troopers. it just seems to me, and I see it happen all the time, accident happens on I-26, court shuts down. It takes 6 troopers to go out. Not that it doesn't take 6 troopers. I can tell you, when it's a calamity out there and it's an overturned tractor trailer, it does take 6 troopers. But, you know, once something like that happens, I guess my point is, it seems like we've got to get beyond the 800. And I know you say it's tough. So, is there something we could do to encourage people to take a class in technical college to want to interest in them? Do you recruit people? I know you recruit a lot of people from the military because I talked to the troopers and they have a military background. But what are you doing to try? I know you say you want 1,200, but what are we doing?
Well, I think, first of all, what we've done over the last few years in terms of pay has helped. And as much as we can do to continue.
But we're still at 800.
Yeah.
We're paying them more, but we still got the same number.
On average, but we've seen it at least start to stabilize a little bit. And I think we're at a point where we can gain some traction without question. But I think for us in particular, when you're looking at the demands on law enforcement, one of the things that we've done, and I don't want to, maybe this give me an opportunity to shift focus a little bit from our uniform divisions to our non-uniform divisions. Our Office of Highway Safety and Justice programs has law enforcement networks. And what we've done, we've realized we need to do, and we've done very effectively, is to be able to more successfully partner with local law enforcement agencies to address some of these types of demands that you're, or challenges, perhaps it's better said, that you're referencing, Senator. For example, you know, we know that right now DUI and DUI fatalities are a significant problem, but we also know that we're still out there making a lot of arrests, and actually arrests have increased. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we're partnering with our local agencies to do law enforcement specials that help us tremendously. So, of course, it's not just us in the patrol or Department of Public Safety that's challenged with personnel. Local law enforcement is challenged with the same types of things. So through these partnerships, we found it to be very much more effective. $55,000, as we mentioned, that's a pretty decent starting salary. If it was higher, could we expect different results? Probably so. You know, if perhaps we were starting at a rate of pay, you know, for an inexperienced officer where we are for a master trooper, then I think you would absolutely see some significant traction that was being made there. You know,
What's the master trooper rate?
it's $74,000 a year. That's topped out $74,000 a year. Yeah. Well, you know, I started out at 18.5, so you know when we start looking at those numbers, those are pretty impressive numbers. But again, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, we're sort of a victim to our own success as a state when we're looking at the level of economic growth and the types of salaries that are being paid by the private sector. If we were looking to be more competitive in those regards, I think we would probably see more traction. But for us, what I want to focus on is that what we do is where we see a challenge, we see an opportunity. And right now, if we say, you know, we may have a little bit of difficulty getting beyond that 800. Well, let's find ways we can still deliver the same quality services to the state of South Carolina with what we have by more effectively utilizing that and more effectively partnering with other law enforcement organizations.
Let me ask you a couple other lines of questions. Where are you on diversity? I do see women troopers. I see troopers of color, but I don't see broad numbers. Or where are we on that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I know, especially in terms of our female troopers, we do have a significantly larger number of female troopers right now. In terms of minority, I think we're relatively stable there. We've probably fallen behind a little bit in that regard. But again, that's competing with the private sector for that same level of talent. That makes us a little bit more challenging for us there. But we're relatively stable in those regards. I know that. I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that we're relatively stable in those regards.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing that always, I don't say concerns me, but I smile every time I see it because number one, I really appreciate it. But number two, I'm thinking, boy, is this the best your talent could be is directing traffic at the football game. Do y'all make universities pay for that? Or is that just something that every trooper has to give up all their Saturdays to go direct traffic at the football games, and that's something that we're making y'all do?
Well, no, we're not. Well, actually, we're prohibited by, I believe, at proviso at this point, and I think there's a discussion of whether that's going to be incorporated into law, that we can't charge another state agency for our services. So we don't charge the universities for those services. Now,
Well, you know, they charge me a whole lot for football tickets. It seems like they could pass a little bit of that on to you.
I understand, yes, sir. I don't know that I disagree with you, but I know that's where we are. But what we
But
do,
doesn't that
yeah.
lead to the having to work every weekend thing that does add to the morale issue and the retention issue? If I know that I've got to work every weekend during football season.
well, what we've been able to do with that is pay overtime for our personnel to work those games as opposed to pulling people up. It's twofold. Number one, not requiring our people to work every weekend. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that we emphasized as a leadership team when we came in is when somebody's off on a holiday weekend, they're off on a holiday weekend. Okay, unless it's absolutely necessary for them to work, and we have situations where we do that. But we give them the opportunity to come in and make overtime to do those types of to fill those roles. So we've done, I think, a pretty capable job of balancing those issues and making sure that we're not working every weekend. And if they have to work, give them an opportunity to put some extra money in their pocket.
And I know you mentioned the ACE group, and then I know you got a MATE team. Are there other specialty units within the patrol?
Well, yes, sir. Well, actually, we have our community relations officers, which they do a tremendous job, not only in terms of engaging the communities we serve, but also they do a great job recruiting for us. So they're our recruiters. Of course, we have our training unit, our insurance enforcement unit. So there are some other specialized units within the patrol.
Okay, thank you.
Do you, for this football games, are you able to fill those needs with volunteers? For people who volunteer, yeah, I'll take the overtime on Saturday, or are you actually having to make some of these folks work?
Well, now, as far as I know, and of course, Colonel Williamson could speak more specifically to how that schedule works now, but from my understanding of it, at this point, we're pretty effectively been able to manage schedules to put people in those positions so they're not working additional days in order to cover those ball games.
Okay. The other point I make, and I understand state agencies not charging each other, but to the Senator from Orangeburg's point, we wouldn't be talking about taxpayer dollars. This would be privately raised athletic dollars. Those guys they're on duty when they're doing that?
Yes, sir, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not when they're making as much money as they're making off football.
Yeah, so your guys and your ladies who are out there working, I mean, they're getting paid overtime.
That's right.
Every time.
But that's coming out of your budget.
That's right. Yes.
Yes. So in essence, taxpayers are funding all that with the football, and when the schools are making a lot of extra money off of it.
And coaches not work.
Is proviso. Yeah. Okay. Thank you about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Director Woods.
Good morning.
And the senators have asked a few of my questions, but just to circle back to a couple of them. You talked about, you answered the senator from Orangeburg's question about diversity, and
Right.
I would love to get those specifically. Follow up, you can send it in. But
Sure.
where are you as far as the leadership team, though? What's the diversity of your leadership team?
Well, our leadership team right now has significant. We do have significant diversity on our leadership team. Of course, Colonel Williamson is the commander of the Highway Patrol. We have, as I go through, our Major Patterson is African American. We have an African American commander in Troop 5. So the leadership team by itself has a significant amount of diversity. I don't have those numbers, but I know that we do.
Do you have female troopers in the leadership team?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, we do. We have a female major with the Department of Public Safety. Now came from the patrol. She's commissioned with the Department of Public Safety now as a major. So we do. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I would imagine that the conversation about recruiting, it just seems to me that since 2020, law enforcement has just gotten a lot of a hit. Have you seen any particular change? Because you took took office around the time that it seems like there's a lot of changes in law enforcement nationally and their perception of law enforcement. Do you feel like that's impacted the department at all?
I think it probably has to some extent, but one of the things it's different about South Carolina is that, and one of the things that Senator Massey was mentioning is going out and being able to engage with our troopers. But one of the things our personnel realize, and I would venture to say that law enforcement as a whole in this state recognize, is not just the leadership of this department, but the leadership of the state is pro-law enforcement. And we see that not just in terms of words, but in terms of actions. When we look, for example, in the pay increases that we received over the last few years. So we know that we have the support of the leadership in the General Assembly. We have the support of the leadership in the governor's office. So I think in terms of the negative view of law enforcement, I don't know that it's as pervasive in the state of South Carolina. I know Director Swindler from the Academy is here. You can speak to it. We've seen a lot of officers come in from out of state who want to come here to work, not necessarily with, do highway patrol work, but other types of law enforcement work. So I think overall the environment in South Carolina has remained relatively stable, and it probably has increased in terms of police or law enforcement perception of how the public and how the General Assembly and how the governor in the state view police officers.
That's great. And you mentioned that there's a community relationship team or division.
Sure.
To that point, I think that it goes a long way where we're building relationships. And of course,
sure.
No one likes to be, pulled over, but,
sure.
The interaction that they have with the officers when that happens is positive, or at the football games. And so can you tell us what's your view and your perspective and what trickles down to the officers regarding the interaction with the public and the feeling that our citizens need to take away from, even if it might not be extremely positive if I'm getting a ticket?
Yeah, I think it's in this one. And let me go back, if I can, to 2020 and the issues we were.